Reading from 1 Samuel chapter 16, beginning at verse 1. The Lord said to Samuel, "How long will you grieve over Saul? I have rejected him from being king over Israel. Fill your horn with oil and set out. I will send you to Jesse the Bethlehemite, for I have provided for myself a king among his sons." And Samuel said, "How can I go? If Saul hears of it, he will kill me." And the Lord said, "Take a heifer with you, and say, 'Have come to sacrifice to the Lord.' Invite Jesse to the sacrifice, and I will show you what you shall do. And you shall anoint for me the one whom I name to you." Samuel did what the Lord commanded and came to Bethlehem. The elders of the city came to meet him trembling and said, "Do you come peaceably?" He said, "Peaceably I have come to sacrifice to the Lord. Sanctify yourselves and come with me to the sacrifice." And he sanctified Jesse and his sons and invited them to the sacrifice. When they came, he looked on Eliab and thought, "Surely the Lord's anointed is now before the Lord." But the Lord said to Samuel, "Do not look upon his appearance or on the height of his stature, because I have rejected him. For the Lord does not see as mortals see. They look on the outward appearance, but the Lord looks on the heart." Then Jesse called Abinadab and made him pass before Samuel. He said, "Neither has the Lord chosen this one." Then Jesse made Shammah pass by, and he said, "Neither has the Lord chosen this one." Jesse made 7 of his sons pass before Samuel, and Samuel said to Jesse, "The Lord has not chosen any of these." Samuel said to Jesse, "Are all your sons here?" And he said, "There remains yet the youngest, but he is keeping the sheep." And Samuel said to Jesse, "Send and bring him, for we will not sit down until he comes here." He sent and brought him in. Now he was ruddy and had beautiful eyes and was handsome. And the Lord said, "Rise and anoint him, for this is the one." Then Samuel took the horn of oil and anointed him in the presence of his brothers. And the Spirit of the Lord came mightily upon David from that day forward. Samuel then set out and went to Ramah. William Thorlby wrote an article for business professionals about the importance of first impressions. He says that it is within our nature to make judgments about one another on limited information, on how we look, on appearances. He writes, "When you step into a room, even though no one in that room knows you or has seen you before, they will make 10 decisions about you based solely on your appearance. They will make many more, but you can be assured that they will make at least 10. They will decide about your economic level, your educational level, your trustworthiness, your social position, your level of sophistication, your economic heritage, your social heritage, your educational heritage, your success, your moral character." Thorlby says, in order to be successful in almost any endeavor, you must be sure that these decisions about you are favorable, because in the first impression you make, you are what you wear. Like it or not, it is that first impression that will dictate future associations. Now, is Thorlby overstating the importance of first impressions in this article? Probably. Do people really make 10 decisions about every new person that walks in the room? Are we really that thoroughly judgmental with one another? I hope not. If it were so, some of us would be afraid to go out in public anywhere. At the same time, I do think he is on to something. In our culture, there is a lot of emphasis on outward appearances. We put a lot of credence in the importance of the first impression. It is estimated that the global cosmetic industry is worth somewhere in the order of $465 billion. That is just the stuff we put on our bodies to make ourselves look younger and smell like fragrant flowers in springtime. Late night infomercials peddle miracle skin lotion, Joan Rivers jewelry, countless exercise machines designed to give you washboard abs, bikini bodies. And my favorite, for the follically challenged, spray-on hair. Do you remember spray-on hair? They sell these products with so much enthusiasm that you would think they had discovered the fountain of youth, and that is likely the idea that they hope to project. Appearances, first impressions, mean a great deal to us. They are important. And yet, sometimes what life teaches us with great clarity is just the opposite. That is often impressions, first impressions, are misleading. Appearances don't always tell you very much. Style does not always indicate substance. Many years ago, we took a vacation to the Maritimes with my brother and his family. My oldest then, Ben, was maybe 2 years old at the time. We were returning home from our vacation, and we landed in St. John, New Brunswick, around supper time, tired and hungry. We asked the guy behind the desk where we could get a bite to eat. He said he knew a good place. He said it didn't look like much, but the food was really good. He was right. It was what appeared to be a biker bar located in a parking garage. We went in, and I began to have second thoughts immediately. There were only a few other people in the place, dim-lit, kind of ominous-looking fellows smoking cigarettes, drinking beer at the bar, a couple of guys at the back playing pool. I could see the cook at the back drawing on a cigarette. It didn't seem like a family diner, let's just say that. It seemed like one of those places that you wouldn't be caught dead in, or maybe you would be caught dead in. But we stayed, and I'm glad we did, because if we had been led by first impressions and appearances, we would have never discovered that that bar served a wonderful roast chicken dinner with a garden salad, balsamic vinaigrette. Delicious. It was wonderful. So while the decorum was left wanting, the food was delicious. Appearances are often misleading. In the fall of 1989, Karen and I got engaged. There had been a lot of pleading and petitioning and getting down on the knees that precipitated this event. And finally I said, "Okay, Karen, if you insist, I'll marry you." We were both in school at the time, so we didn't have a lot of money. But I had won this little prize, $500 I think it was, that I was supposed to spend on Bible commentaries, but I decided to use the money to buy an engagement ring. A friend of mine gave me an address of a jeweler down on Bay Street, so one day I found the building. It was an old run-down building. Went in the front door, pressed the elevator, it wasn't working, walked up 3 flights of stairs, down a poorly lit hall, dusty old carpet curled at the edges, all the while wondering if I had been in the right place. Came to the end of the hall. There was a large steel door, knocked on the door. A voice on the other side said, "What do you want?" I said what I was after. I heard bolts snapping back. The door opened. I was ushered into a room by a small man with thick glasses. I asked about an engagement ring, and he began to sketch on a piece of paper different designs. I chose one. He told me he would call me when he finished the ring. You know, I left there feeling uneasy about the engagement ring. I didn't really know what I'd ordered. I began to think that I should have gone to the jeweler in the mall to pick a ring in one of those really well-lit mirrored glass cases. But 2 weeks later, when I picked up the ring, I was more than pleasantly surprised. I felt like I had almost literally discovered a diamond in the rough. A diamond in the rough part of town. Appearances can be deceiving. One day the old priest Samuel was summoned by God to go to the town of Bethlehem to find the next ruler of Israel. It was a period of history when Israel was ruled by powerful kings. King Saul had been a great king in his time, but he had lost the favor of God. So the time was ripe for Samuel to anoint his successor. The Bible says that Samuel was obedient to God. He went to the house of Jesse and stated his purpose. He announced, "The next king of Israel will be one of your sons." We might imagine that the word of this spread quickly in that small town, capturing the imagination of the townsfolk, who would have gathered with great anticipation. Who would it be? They might have whispered amongst themselves, "Which one will he choose?" After all, Jesse had 8 sons to choose from, although at least initially only 7 were in the running for the king's job. We might imagine that Jesse led his sons out on center stage, one at a time, as if they were prize farm animals on a halter. The first was the eldest son, Eliab. He was perhaps the most impressive in size and stature. In his commentary on this story, Eugene Peterson described the son in this way. Eliab's mountainous size and rough-hewn good looks commanded attention. Hulking and brutish, Eliab was used to getting his own way by sheer force of muscle. It mattered little whether people liked or disliked what they saw. Eliab dominated. Clearly, here was a man who could get things done. Eliab must have been the obvious choice for king. He seemed to have everything to offer. But whatever it was that Samuel was looking for in a future king of Israel, Eliab did not possess it. The next son Jesse marched in front of Samuel was Abinadab. Peterson says Abinadab was an intellectual snob, a tall, stringy beanpole. He stood before Samuel with sneering arrogance. He was the only brother who had been to college. He used big words, showing off his prestigious learning every chance he got. He had squinty eyes behind thick Coke bottle glasses. Samuel dismissed him with a gesture. The third son was Shammah. He had his good qualities like the others. After Samuel studied and dismisses the third son, the Bible quits naming them. We are told there were 4 more. Proudly presented by Jesse, each stood before Samuel. As each in turn was rejected, tension built up. This son certainly would be chosen, yet none was chosen. The show was over. Jesse was pathetic in his disappointment. The 7 sons humiliated. Samuel bewildered, wondering whether he got his instructions straight, whether or not he'd landed at the right address. "Is there any more?" Samuel asks. "Well, there is one more, the youngest," Jesse says, "but he's out in the field tending the sheep." The Hebrew word Jesse uses to describe David is hackaton. Hackathon is a word that suggests insignificance. He is a nobody. It'd be like saying David is an afterthought. He's the runt of the litter. But Jesse's assessment of the youngest son does not discourage Samuel. And when young David is brought in for inspection, the Lord whispers to Samuel, "This is the one. Take your horn of oil and anoint him." And of course we know the end of the story. David would go on to be a great king of Israel, perhaps the greatest king. But few would have believed it on that day. Not his father, certainly not his brothers, or the townsfolk. Who would have guessed that the Hackathon, the runt of the litter, would be the next king of Israel? The story suggests, among other things, that God has a wonderful sense of humor. It also conveys the insight that God does not see us as we tend to see each other, nor does God judge us in the same way that we judge each other, and even ourselves. The Bible says the Lord does not see as mortals see. They look on the outward appearance, but the Lord looks on the heart. God doesn't seem much interested in our economic or educational level. He doesn't care about our social heritage or our pedigree, much less about our success, or the other things that we deem so important in projecting our image to the world. God doesn't look at a person with a checklist of 10 things. He has but one concern. He looks at the heart. I think this story calls into question the way we tend to look at one another. Moreover, the story invites us to look beyond the facade, beyond outward appearances, and to see what is really important. And of course, that's not an easy task. It's easier to see as mortals see than to try to conceive how God must see us. It's easier to look upon the outward appearances than to look upon the heart of another human being. The latter takes time and commitment. There is no room for snap judgments based on outward appearances. It may be a while before you discover that the runt of the litter has the heart of a king. It may be a while before you discover that the loud and obnoxious neighbor up the street is actually the person who in a period of crisis would be there for you every time and gladly give you the shirt off his back. It takes a little time to discover that the sullen and irritable lady has, contrary to outward show, a heart of gold and is quietly leading a life that would become a saint. It takes time and commitment to see and seek and affirm the goodness and God-given light in other people. It takes discerning eyes to see beyond appearance and image, to see others as God does, to look upon the heart. John Shea tells about the school teacher who received gifts from his students at Christmas time. And about the third year, the teacher could name the gift by the size of the box. And whenever his students would come up with a long, flat box, he would know that they were handkerchiefs. He could tell by the shape and size of the box. So the teacher would toss those long, flat boxes in the closet unopened. Then, as he needed a handkerchief, of course, he would open a box and take one out. The teacher always had more boxes than he needed handkerchiefs. One time the teacher went into his closet, took out a box and opened it, and instead of a handkerchief, there was, to his surprise, an antique pocket watch. The teacher said, "All this time I possessed an antique pocket watch, and I didn't know it." Life teaches us that often there is more than meets the eye. Experience tells us that appearances are often misleading. And the Bible tells us that what is really important is not readily apparent, but invisible to the eye.